Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.
That was quick.
Yeah, Mark, don't worry. I'm driving on a new expressway and it's absolutely safe.
Hello and welcome to the second edition of PwC Presents The Winning Leap in association with CNBC TV 18. This is a show where we look at how businesses create value, discuss the strategies and opportunities that are vital for their growth and the various challenges they face in India's economic environment. This week, we look at risk and regulatory complexity, analyze the depth of these issues and derive how best to tackle them.
In the recent past, large-scale man-made calamities have manifested and changed the course of business for many organizations. There was no forecasting model that could predict the impact of the economic crisis, and its consequences continue to take established economists and business academics by surprise. In a world with an ever-evolving landscape, with an emerging and complex regulatory environment, organizations not only have to manage known risks, but also have to become better prepared to manage grey swans.
Joining me on the show right now is Mr. D.G. Shah, head of the Indian Pharma Alliance. Sujay Shetty is leader, pharmaceutical and life practice at PwC. Gentlemen, thank you very much, both of you, for being here. If I can start with you, Mr. Shah. First up, what are the big issues facing the industry at this point?
Well, as you rightly said, the first major issue is winning the confidence back of the US FDA. FDA had started questioning the bona fides of the industry and the industry leaders. Through transparency and the commitment that we have shown, FDA is willing to meet with us every 6 months, discuss issues and review the progress we are making. So that has brought us to a point where we can constructively engage with FDA and address the issues which Indian companies are facing, and equally it's an issue which FDA is concerned about for US citizens.
So do you want to add something to that?
The US, from the point of view of business goals, is one of India Inc.'s most profitable markets with a big book of business. So we need to get a balance of both of those right. And most of the large companies are working very hard to get on top of these issues and regain the confidence of the US FDA. So this is at the moment one of our principal issues facing the industry.
Very briefly, if, Mr. Shah, you can touch upon what really went wrong at that point 3 years back, or nothing went wrong and it was basically greater scrutiny.
Apart from greater scrutiny and all that, which are legitimate, the Indian industry tried to cover it up. Some of the mistakes were totally out of ignorance, and this is what created doubt, and industry lost the confidence. So we first made it a point that how do we win the confidence back. Second point, which we have been emphasizing, and if you want a lasting solution to this problem, it's the capacity building. And we have been asking FDA that you must engage in capacity building.
So what are companies really doing, if you can give some examples to kind of deal with this
So amongst the larger companies, we find a lot of emphasis on 2 or 3 different fronts. There would be the emphasis on going in for automation, capital expenditure. Indian plants were anyway, amongst the top companies, some of the better plants you would see in the world. I mean, I've seen many, and I think the one set up by Indian companies, hats off. So, but there's more spending going on, as Mr. Shah said, more automation, trying to fix that. And also a concerted attempt to, as Mr. Shah said, capacity building, which is work culture. Because a lot of this stuff refers to how our culture. In the US, the famous saying, you write as you do and you do as you write. Somehow, culturally, they're able to do that. We don't do things intentionally, so there's not an attempt to be fraudulent. But sometimes, yes, shortcuts are taken, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and they've led to these repercussions. So I think there's a lot of work going on by Indian industry on trying to fix that cultural problem.
In terms of the seriousness of the issues in large part which are being addressed, are these data integrity issues which is the most serious part, or are these just general good manufacturing practices, not being compliant with the GMP practices?
Historically, data integrity was the biggest issue, but now that comes up and is hitting the companies, what was done in the past. So this is, I would say, more or less been addressed, and no companies are taking that risk because they realize that cost of non-compliance is far more than cost of compliance. Our biggest challenge is culture change, the change of management, because the way you live at home and the way you need to work in the plant is not the same as of today.
Sure. You were giving me some interesting numbers in terms of how much companies are spending now, right?
Data for 5 companies show that last year they spent 3,500 crore on legal and professional fees. Now, this does not include the automation equipment which we talked about.
Sure.
Those are additional.
Sure.
But this is merely addressing this culture issue,
Sure.
training people, capacity building, and engaging the top talents from India and outside
Sure.
to change the way we were doing business.
Sure. Sujay, how is the FDA kind of responding to all these measures and initiatives taken by Indian companies?
In a recent briefing that we did for some of our leading clients in India, the message we were given was that the FDA is trying to, get you to a zone of comfort with them, or rather a zone of trust. I think it's not an adversarial relationship. It could have been seen as one in the initial days, but both the agency and the Indian companies are trying to find a middle ground of trust.
Let's come to some of the local market-related issues. One big issue is selling malpractices, Mr. Shah. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Put that in context for us, and what can the government really do to tackle this?
See, in every industry, there are a few black ships. A few undesirable practices also developed by virtue of competitive pressures. Government has come back as a knee-jerk reaction, saying that, look, we want to regulate everything. How many samples you give, whether you can give a 10 rupee pen as a sample to a doctor or not, to a genuine need of the medical profession of continuing medical education is trying to impose certain restrictions.
So this would all, the restrictions you're talking about would fall under what is called UCPMP, Uniform Code for Selling and Marketing.
Yeah, Uniform Code of Pharmaceutical Marketing Practices. Where industry went wrong was selling doctors and their families to a holiday. 60 to 70 large companies were to voluntarily accept and say, look, hereafter
we're not doing this, we won't do this.
Right, we won't do this. That's what would change and create a pressure.
Just like manufacturing, again here it's a question of life and death, if you want to put it, because ultimately the theory is that the patient cannot make an informed choice because somebody has to be impartial, as in the clinician, the physician. And if he's unduly influenced, he might make a wrong choice there. So it is, the industry accepts that. I think there's got to be some level of sanity. The question is, all selling practices may not be per se invalid. Some of them may be good, but the vast majority, such as sending people to fancy foreign vacations, whether they justify what you're trying to educate the doctor on, is questionable. I think the government is moving. They've kept this guideline that you just mentioned on a voluntary basis for some months now, for some years now, not some months. This is.
But is this going to be put into law? I mean, will this be?
It's a voluntary.
It's a voluntary guideline.
And have, as you said, 60, 70 top companies come together, and have they, or that is still being done?
The process is on. PwC has been trying this. We have also been trying that look, if we can get, because everyone says
the other person has to do it first. So if you go first.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's where it is at the moment. The government seems to have made a few statements in the last few months that they would like to see it as mandatory. But among the top companies, again, there are 2 points. One is that to the larger US FDA point, you can't be perfect there, not so perfect here. It's all the same culture that permits in the companies. So for your own good, you might want to do something. And the second, there's been such a sort of, for want of use of a better word, insanity of promoting in this way. It's important to restore some kind of a level playing field order, and of course above all this patient needs. So we'll see, something will obviously be done at some point.
So Jay, Mr. Shah, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us on this very interesting discussion. Thank you indeed.
Thank you.
All right, that's it from me. We're going to take a very short break, but we have another interesting conversation on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Taking the discussion on risk and regulatory complexity further, I have with me Manish B. Agarwal, Leader Infrastructure at PwC, and Guy Perry, President Smart Cities with SL Infrastructure. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining in here on this edition. Guy, let me start with you to begin with. What are the top risks and regulatory issues that you find you have to deal with here in India?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is that we still have a government system that's operating in silos. So trying to actually coordinate them to make better urban environments, because ultimately that's what we're looking for, is not just how do we implement a piece of infrastructure, but how do we implement a better way of life. And one of the things that we are finding is that getting them on the same page is quite a challenge. So some of the SPVs that are being formed as part of the smart cities, I think, are absolutely going in the right direction on that. But we are finding that even on a project as simple as a street, there are many, many hurdles. We're already facing a number of delays. But we don't mind going through that process because we know the next one will be much more efficient. But you just have to do it.
Manish, what are developers doing to kind of overcome these issues?
Yeah, so I think like Guy mentioned, delays has been a major concern for developers. While part of it was actions that the government needed to take, developers are realizing that they need improved project management capabilities in-house. Capacity building within the teams for bringing more predictability to project progress. So I see attempts like that to really strengthen project management and project delivery capability. The second thing, again, as Guy mentioned, that when they're looking at new projects, the experience from the past, which led to challenges, financial challenges and so on, that has gone into the learning process. So people are incorporating a healthy sense of skepticism when they're approaching new opportunities. So both for new projects and in case of existing projects, we clearly see developers becoming more mature in their approach to winning projects and in delivering.
But in a way, what the government is also putting up as projects for bidding are more complete, right?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think, it's both the demand side and the supply side, in the sense that if developers and lenders will not look at projects that are not fully ready, it is incumbent on the government to then put in that much more effort in preparation of a project before they are put out. And we see that happening both ways.
Gisa, you said that you're running pilots. There's no other way to do it but to get your hands dirty, be on the ground, etc.
We do quite a bit of analysis prior to diving into something. But ultimately, you have to pick the ones that you think are most promising and the ones that you'll be able to execute on. And then run through the process. We also work with cities and regions to help them actually have a better strategy for their development. So by looking at a project and saying, okay, let's help the government with what we know, they may end up going to someone else and working with them. But at least we will have advanced the process so that the next bid is more sophisticated. Quickly.
In your area, smart cities, yes, are things moving at a pretty fast pace, or how would you rate it?
It depends. I think the aspirations are moving at a fast pace. But I have an issue about how we define smart cities, what the priorities are. I think that we need to focus more on a human metric. In other words, are people coming to cities, and are they having really a better life? Are they having a healthier life? Are they having a longer life? Are they actually more satisfied with their lives? And that becomes a basis upon which we make certain infrastructure
But in
decisions.
terms of your interactions with the government, I mean, private-public partnerships, etc., I mean, is that smooth? There is understanding?
I think that there is an understanding. Right. I think it varies considerably from city to city. But we look at building long-term relationships because this is not a short-term game. We have to build trust with the governments, and that's why we're so transparent in our process.
What can governments and banks, for example, who are important entities in this structure, do to advance these PPPs back into focus?
So I think the first thing that the government needs to do, and is doing to some extent, is de-risking the PPP model. I think over time the PPP model became necessarily a user charge and a demand risk-based model. That is not necessary. I think the second is, and again the banks are recognizing the criticality of due diligence at the lenders level. Because only that will bring in genuine project finance into the infrastructure market in India. The lender's diligence in a PPP context is the kind of litmus test of feasibility of a project. I think again in a smart city context, several cities want to raise bonds or go for long-term financing. I think that in some sense will become a test of the feasibility of the underlying project, the SPV and the underlying cash flows, and the role of private sector in that.
So do comment on that. I mean, especially on the point about aligning with sources of funding like the bond market, etc., your sector specifically.
Well, one of the things that we, of course, worry about is the political vicissitudes that can occur over time, because these are long-term projects. And that's why it's so important that we get the PPP structure right, and we have common objectives over time that are beyond the reach of political change.
In terms of funding, etc., you think it's all it's sorted, or?
Well, I wouldn't say it's sorted yet. I'm not sure that there's been that much private investment yet in the smart city arena. But I think that as we tee up these projects more and more rigorously, and we achieve these common goals, or at least we set these common goals, I think that we'll see that the financing is much more forthcoming. There's a lot of international financing that wants to come to India. They want the right vehicles.
Where are we at in that process in terms of tying up funding structures? We got infrastructure trusts, real estate trusts, rule changes which kind of plugged the loopholes earlier, and we got encouraging feedback on that. But come in where Guy left off on that.
I think clearly risk management is at the heart of private capital in infrastructure. From the government's point of view, it is about de-risking investment in infrastructure, limiting risks to performance and not to political changes and politically sensitive issues like water tariffs, for example, that will not attract capital. From a developer's perspective, it is about de-risking delivery of projects, and once those two come together, then it's really for the investor community, partly domestic but in huge terms overseas, to then look at these two sets of risks being investable. India's credit rating in any case is an area of concern. It is investment grade, and therefore that has an implication in terms of the kind of returns that one can make. But having said that, the returns are attractive at the risk level.
I'd just like to add to that, if cities are able to create safe havens for investment, they will find the investment flooding in. And this is again in Poland, 1999, 2000, 2001, it was a very risky market, perceived in many ways the way India is perceived today. But we created a safe haven within a district of a city, and the investors just flooded into that. We need to create those kinds of environments. I think it's probably going to be a city.
That kind of environment?
I think certain cities have a very good reputation now, and the question is whether they will build upon it. And of course, it means that different arms of government have to be working in coordinated ways. But if you can hit on all cylinders, In those contexts, I can guarantee you everyone is looking at India as a prime place for investment today.
Guy, Manish, thank you very much, both of you, for joining me on this discussion. Join me same time next week as we bring you another interesting discussion. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching. That was quick.
Yeah, Ma, don't worry. I'm driving on the new expressway and it's absolutely safe.
Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.